Good evening. Can y'all hear? Okay. I won't have to yell and use my teacher voice then. I'm Pam Kaufman. I'm Curator of Education here at the Museum of Art DeLand, and I want to welcome you all tonight. This is going to be a really good evening because I know Lauren is going to do a fantastic job. She always does, and we're so excited that she's here. This is going to be the first, well actually this is the first in a series of artist talks that is presented by the Museum of Art and the Fall Festival of the Arts DeLand. So it's kind of a collaborative effort. So there's going to be more, so keep your eyes out and find out what else is going to be coming up. But we're really excited that we have Lauren Austin to be the first speaker in this series. So, and what a perfect exhibition for Lauren to talk about, because she does her own beautiful, amazing quilt work. So I think it's a great synergy there. So I'm going to read this because she's so accomplished, and I'll never remember it all because I have my COVID color now, and it took a little bit of my brain away with me. So Lauren's been designing and making quilts for over 30 years. Prior to turning to art and art education full-time, Lauren worked as a U.S. diplomat in Latin America, as a human rights and civil rights lawyer, and as a legal writing professor at Syracuse University. All things I never knew about Lauren until I read it. Right. I just knew her as a fantastic artist. She was a community artist in residence at the Atlantic Center for the Arts in New Smyrna Beach until 2009. She lived in China for 5 years, working on quilts, learning Chinese, and providing art demonstrations and workshops to area community groups and schools before returning to Houston and then Michigan. And now we are so glad that we have her back here. Although I have to say, she and I were emailing and talking on the phone prior to this, and she just had a workshop on indigo dyeing, and she was complaining about the mosquitoes. Sorry, Lauren, it comes with Florida. So anyway, without further ado, please, Lauren Austin.
Good evening.
Hi.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because this talking through the mask when you're not someone used to yelling is a little much. But I think if it's working with the microphone, that's what we'll do. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to go upstairs and walk through the exhibit. Okay? And then I think if there are questions, if there are comments, let's do them upstairs. Okay? Unless there's something burning, okay? But I'm just gonna pull this little one. I love this, I might take it home. What I wanna talk about is the idea of self-expression and self-determination as a foundation of African American creativity. We are a people that over the past 400 years have been dealing with a system that has typecast us, that has decided when we are people or not. And we have worked our way through that and produced enormous works of art, enormous music, enormous dance, science, architecture, all of it in spite of the typecasting and the oppression. And for me, the foundation of all of that is self-expression and self-determination, and they work together. And the work of Aminah Robinson and Faith Ringgold is an amazing example of those issues. First, I have to say that there are things that Black artists do to survive that also work toward self-expression and self-determination. One example is making a children's book. So many of us have done this. In fact, so many that when my father talks to me about my art, the first thing he says is, "Where is your book?" And he doesn't mean scholarly. He means a children's book. Because this is one of the ways, an important way, to pass on our knowledge to the next generation. Jacob Lawrence did it. Faith Ringgold did it. Aminah Robinson did it. And Faith has 15 books that she published from her artwork, 15 books, at a time when the percentage of children's books authored by Black people was at 1.5%. Okay? It hasn't really gotten much better. You may think, because of publicity, that there are so many books by Black people. There are a lot of books, but the percentage is still very small. So I look at my own place in the firmament of the Black canon of art, way, way down there in the basement, okay? And Faith and Aminah are way up there in the heavens, okay? But in fact, the way that we talk about art and classify art in our culture is not vertically, but in a circle, okay? We are in this circle where the work of quilters, of painters, of sculptors, of ironwork, all fit into this circle of Black life and the documentation of Black life. So, what does this all mean? Okay, I guess self-expression. Self-expression involves documentation. It involves the time to enjoy what you find and to kind of dress yourself in the beauty that you and others in your community have created. So it's like every time I go into the African American Museum of Art here in DeLand, I feel like I'm being bathed in the art of my ancestors, because it's all there and it's all well cared for. Every piece has been dusted and oiled, and every piece has been set in its little space. Okay. When you look at the work of Aminah Robinson and her Ragamuffin Journeys 1 and 2, which is this huge, huge quilt that is not a quilt. It is a quilt that is probably 4 stories long. And in the National Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, they permanently installed it at the top floor, and it follows a winding staircase all the way to the first floor. I saw it in person when a show that I was in, And Still We Rise, curated by Carolyn Maslumi, was at that museum. And we ran up and down the stairs to look at her work that took her whole life, probably 40 years of work to make. So, but Aminah Robinson worked in this circle method. So it was not the only thing she worked on. She kept coming back to it and adding more and adding more. She might have had 15, 20 projects going on at a time. She might work on something for a little bit, put it in a drawer. She was incredibly organized. Her home is now a kind of a mini museum and artist residency for African American artists. And so you can see this organization, maybe I will someday, I hope, where she knew everything she was working on. I can't say that. So I tell you this because one of the things that happens with looking at our art and looking at how full it is, how many things are there, how intuitive it seems, how like, well, how did they think of that? How could they have thought of that? It just looks organic. And like jazz music, it looks or sounds organic, but it is the product of years of research and work and design and deliberate construction. That's what it is. And it just might look, if you don't know the culture and the people, like it's intuitive or it's organic. When really what it is deliberate reconstruction of our past and a message for us in the present, and a message for our children and those that will come after us to be able to deal with this life that we live. And I knew that when I saw that work. I loved it. I loved the hogmog. You will see examples of hogmog upstairs. What is hogmog? Hogmog is a concoction that Aminah worked on and perfected during her lifetime of a sculptural substance that could harden and be used in her work. And it consists of pig grease and mud and sticks and lye, okay? And she developed it over time. It changed, it got better. She had several different forms that she used in various works. It shows up in her books, her made books, which there, I don't know how many of them, but there are just so many. She is the kind of artist that you look at their body of work and you say, I need to go lie down. There's no way I'm going to get to this point. But at the same time, both Aminah and Faith were very good at the networking in Black creative world. There's a really wonderful little video from the museum in, I think it's the University of Cincinnati. And they're having a conversation, and there's an audience, but it's like the audience isn't even there. They're just talking to each other. And what they're doing is reminiscing about the networking that they had to do to find out things and to do things, because regular art world wouldn't tell them. And so Faith remembers that Aminah was interested in printmaking. And so Faith said, well, you know, in Harlem there's this Blackburn press, and Robert Blackburn is like the guy. You need to go to him, and I'll call him and you go and see him. And so Aminah did that, and her printmaking flourished under Robert Blackburn. And I wonder now, I know that the Blackburn Press still exists. I mean, he's gone, but I wonder how many people using it know that he was black. I wonder. And so our documentation of what happened before, not only way before, but also what happened before in our own lives, really matters, because otherwise our presence in the history is erased. And so we work very hard at that, at making sure that the people who guard our heritage are protected. We make sure that the people who make the art are protected. And there are so many ways that they can be hurt. And as Black people, we know all those ways. And so when we get upset, when we get indignant, when we get protected, that's why. Right? And I see this in the work. Faith did so much her whole life to protect particularly Black women artists, to help them along, and to protest when they were being mistreated. And if you look at her protest series, that's what's going on there. My own personal story about Faith Ringgold is that I went to a quilt convention, we have them, and this one was at Houston, is the IQA, and it was, I think, 98, because Jacob was in grade school. You know how you do time by your kid's age? Well, my youngest, I think, was in grade school at that time, so I think 98. And the Women of Color Quilters Network that I'm a member of decided to meet at Houston for the first time. And we got some of those ballroom tables in a certain spot, and we all met for breakfast. And everybody was complaining about the heat, because most people were from the Northeast. And Faith showed up because she's very good friends with our founding member, Carolyn Maslumi, who has been a curator that I have worked with my whole career. And so she showed up and she said, "Oh, I'm giving a talk, and come on, and everybody go to my talk." So we all went to her talk, and she talked about productivity. And she basically said, make and make more, keep making, and don't stop for anything. Don't let anyone stop your making in any way. And what I do when I am nervous or excited or upset is I pull out my sketchbook and start drawing. And so I had my sketchbook out, and I was drawing her as she was talking. And she has this beautiful, like, long locks that go down to the ground and are all wrapped up around her head. And she, of course, she wears beautiful clothes. And so I'm trying to put all that in there somehow, and not really. And before I know, the talk is finished, and she's in front of me saying, "I want to see what you are doing." And so I opened my book and showed it to her, and she signed it. Wow. And what she said was, "Keep making. Do not allow anyone to get in the way of your making. Thank you."
Wow.
That is the circle of Black creativity, that we support each other in ways that no one else sees, that no one else hears unless we decide to tell it. And I think it's really, really special. I think that relying on that circle is really important. And every time I have needed my circle, they are here, as they are here now. And I know they will always be. And so I have to give back to that circle and make sure that the young ones within the circle know that they are encircled, know that they are protected, know that they can make things that other people don't make, that other people don't understand, that other people don't want. Right? And that is the message that Faith and Aminah have always given me. There's a really interesting video on, I think it's HBO, but it's also on YouTube, called Black Art in the Absence of Light. And it's a retrospective from the perspective of David Driscoll, who I think he just passed during COVID. And he was like one of the most important curators, as well as an artist in his own right. And this was the last thing he worked on. And one of the things that struck me in this whole thing, Faith is in it, and she's absolutely marvelous. And she appears with Michelle Wallace, who wrote Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. And those of us of a certain age remember this book very, very well, and everything that came after it. But what I didn't know until recently was that Michelle Wallace is Faith Ringgold's daughter. And so she's there with her mother in the movie. And it's wonderful to hear the resistance to being typecast, the resistance to how white culture makes art as opposed to how black cultures make art, and that this is ongoing. And Michelle says at one point, my mother, she is the way she is, and she's been that way a long time, okay? And she has not changed. I've changed a whole lot, but my mother, no, she hasn't changed at all. Okay? But David Driscoll says, at one point he says, are you prepared to make art in the absence of light? And what he means by this, what he said he meant, was, are you prepared to make art that the mainstream world will not see, or will not want to see, or will misinterpret? Are you prepared to continue making art when that is the hurdle and the barrier? And I think of every artist I've worked with, every artist expressly making art about and for black people, they all have agreed that that's what they would do. And I think of Aminah Robinson working on a hooked rug, it's about this big, of her mother's face, and that piece took her 5 years to do. And it kept going back in a drawer and coming out and back in a drawer, and then it was placed in a particular part of Journeys 1 that she was absolutely willing and didn't really care about recognition. She was making for different reasons. And I know that all of the artists I have known over time in the black creative community the vast majority of them are making art, understanding that they can make it in the absence of light, and that it will be fine because they are making it for a different reason. And so when you look at this work upstairs, I want you to think about not necessarily what is your reaction to the work, but what is the artist saying to me? And it's very easy to misinterpret what is not understood. And so relying on the word of the artist, I think, is really important, particularly in this situation. I brought, and you can look these later. This is my Aminah Robinson book, a symphonic poem, that I really, really adore this book. And one of the reasons I adore it, the pictures are just fabulous, but one of the reasons I adore it is because the curators took the time to ask Aminah Robinson about every piece. And her words are in red, and the curator's words are in black. And so when I read it, what ends up happening is I just skip over the black and read the red, because I want to know what she thought. Okay? And in our world, the words and the sounds made by black people are not heard. And so we have to fight to get them down. We have to write them down. We have to make other people write them down. We have to say, if you didn't ask me, you don't know. Okay? Don't put your fancies in my work. Listen to my voice. And Faith and Aminah do this so adroitly, so clearly, so perfectly. Every button, every stitch. Please look at the skin tones in Faith's soft sculptures, which it is very, very unusual to see them. They rarely get exhibited. But she made them out of stockings. And at the time she made them, you couldn't, to save your life as a black woman, find a pair of stockings in your color.
That's right.
And so these stockings are dyed with tea and coffee. I know that because she told me that. It's nowhere in the literature. And what the artist says, particularly for black artists, is really, really important. So I think I've talked enough, more than enough, and we should go upstairs.